There is a kind of person you have probably seen before. Maybe you have been that person, at least for a moment, standing in a supermarket line on a Sunday afternoon, watching couples argue over which cereal to buy, watching friends laugh too loud at nothing, watching families perform the ritual of togetherness with that hollow, rehearsed quality that makes your chest feel tight in a way you cannot explain to anyone. And you thought, quietly, behind your eyes where no one looks, I do not need this. Not the argument, not the laughter, not the performance. And then the guilt came because all taught that needing people is health and not needing them is damage. We are taught that solitude is a wound and community is the cure. But what if that teaching is the wound itself? What if the people who seem most free, most alive, most genuinely at peace are the ones who quietly stopped, pretending that other people were the answer to a question they were never actually asking? Charles Bukowski spent the better part of his life being told he was broken. Broken because he drank. Broken because he did not hold a steady job for decades. Broken because he loved badly, wrote about it, without apology, and refused to perform the kind of remorse that society requires when a man lives on his own terms. He died in 1994, and the world is still arguing about whether he was a genius or a cautionary tale, which is itself a very telling argument, because the people who make it are almost always people who are terrified of what his life implies about their own choices. What Bukowski understood, not as a theory, but as a lived fact pressed into his skin by decades of rejection and manual labor and loneliness so dense you could almost hold it, was that most human dependency is not love. It is not connection. It is fear wearing the costume of need. Most people do not reach out because they want to share something real. They reach out because silence frightens them, because being alone with their own thoughts feels like standing in a room where the walls are covered in things they have been avoiding looking at for years. Bukowski had a line, and it goes something like, people are not good to each other, perhaps because they are not good to themselves. Think about that for a moment, not as a cynical observation, but as a precise diagnosis. The person who needs constant validation from others is the same person who cannot sit alone in a quiet room for 30 minutes without reaching for their phone. The person who calls dependency love is the same person who has never asked themselves what they actually want, separate from what they were told to want. Bukowski did not hate people. That is the misreading. He hated the theater. He hated the way people used each other to avoid the one relationship that terrifies everyone most completely, which is the relationship with themselves. He worked as a postal clerk for years. Before that, he starved in rented rooms, slept in parks, ate crackers and drank cheap wine and wrote poems that nobody wanted. And in those years of grinding, humiliating, invisible existence, something happened that almost never happens to people who are surrounded by others at all times. He learned to be enough, not in the motivational poster sense, not the kind of enough that comes with a therapist's approval and a weekend retreat. The raw, ugly, non-negotiable enough that arrives when you have been left alone with yourself long enough that you stop fighting the silence and start listening to it. That is the first habit of people who no longer need anyone in the way most people need others. They have survived their own company. They have sat in the room with themselves, looked at the walls, and decided they could live there. Here is what no one tells you about the people who seem self-contained, who seem to move through the world without that desperate reaching quality that most people carry. They did not arrive there by being strong. They arrived there by being broken in a very specific way, a way that stripped away the illusion that other people could fix what was wrong inside them. Bukowski was not born with solitude as a superpower. He was abandoned by it over and over, until abandonment stopped having power over him. His father beat him. His peers rejected him. Publishers ignored him for years that would have destroyed anyone who needed external approval to justify continuing. But he continued. Not because he was brave in the conventional sense, because he had somewhere along the way transferred his center of gravity from the outside to the inside. And once that transfer happens, the world loses most of its leverage over you. If you are watching this right now and something in your chest is moving even slightly, I want to ask you something directly. As a friend who has sat in the same silence and knows what it costs to admit this, have you ever felt more alone in a crowded room than you do by yourself? Have you ever come home from a gathering of people who are supposed to matter to you and felt emptier than when you arrived, like something was taken rather than given? If that is you, if that specific exhaustion is something you carry, I want you to do something in the comments below. Write, "I know that room," just those 3 words, because somewhere right now, someone else is watching this video feeling exactly what you feel, telling themselves they are the only one, telling themselves something must be wrong with them for feeling this way. Your 3 words will tell them they are not alone in their solitude. And that is not a contradiction, that is the most honest form, of community that exists. What Bukowski modeled, without ever naming it as such, was the practice of radical self-sufficiency that does not come from arrogance, but from exhaustion. From having tried the other way long enough to see it clearly. He drank, yes. He was cruel sometimes, yes. He made choices that looked like self-destruction from the outside, but underneath all of it ran a discipline that most people never develop, because they never have to, which was the discipline of not outsourcing his inner life. Every poem he wrote was an act of staying present with himself when the easier thing would have been to dissolve into distraction, into dependency, into the warm noise of other people's needs and opinions and expectations. He wrote in the morning before the world got loud. He wrote about exactly what he saw without softening it for an audience. He wrote as if no one was watching, which is the only way to write anything true and also the only way to live anything true. The second habit is the willingness to disappoint. People who no longer need others in the desperate sense have usually passed through a period in their lives where they tried very hard to be what others needed them to be and discovered at serious personal cost that it did not work. Not because they failed at the performance, but because the performance itself was the failure. Bukowski understood this with particular clarity because his whole career was built on refusing to perform. He refused to write the kind of poetry that got published in the 1950s and 1960s, the careful, academic, bloodless verse that required institutional approval. He wrote about vomit and barmaids and losing jobs and the specific texture of despair at 2 in the morning in a city that does not care about you. And people told him it was not literature, and he kept writing it anyway. The willingness to disappoint is not the same as not caring about others. It is the recognition that your first obligation is to something true inside yourself, and that compromising that truth to manage someone else's feelings is a form of violence against both of you. The third habit is a relationship with time that most people find incomprehensible. People who have stopped needing others in the addictive sense tend to move through time differently. They are not constantly filling it. They allow it to be empty. They sit with evenings that have no plans, with Sundays that go nowhere, with whole stretches of hours that produce nothing visible. Bukowski spent years doing this, years in cheap rooms with a bottle and a typewriter, and nothing else scheduled. Society calls this waste. It calls it laziness, or worse, depression. But there is something else happening in that emptiness, something that cannot happen when every hour is populated with other people's energy and demands. The self begins to speak in its own voice, not the voice that answers questions, not the voice that performs competence or warmth or ambition, but the voice that knows what it actually wants, what it actually fears, what it actually thinks about the whole strange business of being alive. That voice is very quiet. It cannot be heard over the sound of constant company. The fourth habit, and perhaps the most misunderstood, is that people who no longer need others in the compulsive sense still love, often more deeply than those who need constantly, because their love is not mixed with hunger. It is not the love that grabs and holds too tight because it is terrified of being left. Bukowski loved women with a ferocity that comes through every page of his work. Flawed love, damaged love, love that made terrible choices, but love that was genuinely felt and not performed. He once wrote that he had one regret, that he was not a better husband, not a better father. That line carries more weight than 1,000 poems. about perfect devotion, because it is honest about the gap between what we feel and what we manage to give. People who have stopped needing others in the fearful sense can finally see the people they love clearly, without the distortion that hunger creates, without the constant calculation of what is being given and taken. Their presence in a relationship is a choice, not a requirement, and that changes everything about the quality of that presence. There is something Bukowski never said directly, but that his entire body of work argues without pause. The people who are most useful to the world are the ones who have stopped trying to be acceptable to it, not the ones who have given up, not the ones who have retreated into bitterness, but the ones who have gone so deep into their own honest experience that they accidentally became a mirror for everyone else. His poems about failure are read by millions of people who feel failed. His poems about loneliness reach people at 3 in the morning who thought no one had ever felt exactly what they feel. He did not set out to help anyone. He set out to be honest. And honesty, pushed far enough, becomes the most generous act a human being can perform. If this video opened something in you, if it named something you have been carrying without language for a long time, do something small right now. Press the like button. Not for the algorithm, though it does help this reach the person at 3 in the morning who needs it most, but because it is a way of saying this mattered, this told the truth. That small gesture sends this further into the world, to the person in the rented room with the cheap wine and the feeling that no one has ever put words to what they live. And if you want more of this, if you want a place that keeps returning to these questions without flinching, without dressing them up in false comfort, subscribe to this channel. It was made for the person who has always felt slightly outside the circle, who finds more truth in a broken poem than in a self-help bestseller, who suspects that the life lived honestly on the margins is worth more than the life lived safely at the center. Every video here is made for you. Come back when you need to hear a voice that does not lie.